All right,
Lori.
so recording has started, and thank you everybody for joining us. I'm wondering if Dave and Terry, or Dave, you want to get started, and Terry, and then maybe Mirko, and you guys can talk about how you all got connected with this project and a little bit about it to get started, and then we'll let Mirko take it away. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, I met Mirko probably six or so weeks ago. Maybe, I'm guessing, maybe a couple of months, and was introduced to this new concept. It's kind of an interface to access technology more efficiently and on a broader spectrum. So I think what I realized through talking with him and Terry and some other people is that you just kind of get used to using what's on the market, and you think, well, that's all there is. We sort of compromise in terms of being able to doing certain things with the technology we have. But Mirko has opened up this whole new sort of idea about, that, geez, maybe I can actually, use my joystick or something that I'm really good at using as a means of doing more with a certain piece of software or my phone or whatever kind of technology we're using. So we've just kind of been discussing that, talking about it's starting to sink in for me now. Anyway, it's taken a while, but I sort of proposed, if I had kind of a dream thing that I'd like to be able to do, would be able to play piano again, despite my quadriplegic hands, which I thought was just kind of a wild, crazy idea. Let's see if you can fix that. But I'm beginning to believe that there's a way through technology that we can do more of those types of things, and it could be truly, like I had the same struggle when I started playing drums, because I was playing acoustic drums before I was injured, and then I had to go back to figuring out a new way to play with just my hands and with special gloves that I used to hold the sticks, and electronic drums and sort of programming. And it took some time and effort, and all these things do take time and effort, obviously, but it pays off in the end. And where you get to the point that you feel like you're actually playing and that you're not just doing, I'd still like to play acoustic drums, but okay, that's likely not going to happen after 43 years. I couldn't do it. So anyway, it's just kind of opened up this new concept that we could use different types of interfaces to have more access to things we want to do, basically. So that's my brief intro.
Awesome. Terry?
Well, yeah, I guess I got dragged into the project.
You came willingly. What are you talking about?
No, that's true. That's true. I was trying to find the best way to navigate around an iPad or some sort of pad and a smartphone. And so we started off discussing you could do switch. You could use a switch to scan and another switch to select. That's for the Apple products. Or you could use something like a lip sync, which is the mobile equivalent to this device here I use on my computer, which is a JOUS. So you can use the lip sync, it's called, to move the cursor around the screen and select items the way I do with my JOUS. So yeah, so I'm hoping this project might find a third way, the third way they call it. Access an iPad or, computer screen, smartphone.
Awesome.
And right now, environmental controls are kind of at a crossroads where we've been using old technology. I've got $1,000 Gava remote control. And as Mirko says, we all have smartphones with us, and smartphone could probably do 90% of the stuff that the Gava controller can do. Oh yeah, I'm hoping that yeah, I can get on my smartphone right now. It sits in my backpack, and all I do is call or receive or start calls.
Awesome.
So, yeah, and now with all this voice entry, environmental controls really are at a point where, you know, things are changing. Okay, Google and Alexa, voice controlled devices are really coming to the fore. So yeah, that's how I got involved.
Awesome.
I might just add that the other thing, why we thought this would be a good thing to do, a virtual peer group, is that to get more feedback from people out in the community in different parts of the province as to problems they have with their technology, or ways their technology works and doesn't work, or wild dreams you have about what technology could do for you if you could wave a magic wand, just to really help in the development of this project, that we make sure as much as possible that it meets as many needs as possible, and as flexible and as platform friendly as possible. There's Tom.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Sorry,
guess
guys.
this would be a bit of a brainstorming. So, you know, throw out the craziest ideas you have, I guess.
And I guess the other thing too is it's like you don't have to necessarily be a quadriplegic or not have hand function or not have arm function. Like it's really for, I mean, people, when we're using technology the way that we do, I can see how people even with arm function can develop problems in their hands, in their arms, in their shoulders, in their neck. So like using, you know, voice activated technology or simpler technology to be able to access things can really solve so many problems, especially if you're reliant on your arms and shoulders all the time. It's really important for us to be able to take a break from that, I think. Like I notice when I'm on my computer all the time, my back and neck are just always killing me by the end of the day. And yeah, so I'm trying to limit the amount of time I'm just in this one position, typing with my one finger, you know. Anyways.
Yeah.
Mirko, sorry, go ahead, Dave.
No, I just said I hear you. I'm dealing with that right now.
Yeah.
Much like I always have my iPad on my lap, so when I'm reading like iBooks and stuff, I'm always down like this, and then, you know, so I got to take breaks and stretch.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I used to have it virtual somewhere up here. I could just read wherever I want.
Yeah, yeah. Having it read to you.
Yeah.
Mirko,
That's an idea.
do you want to take it away, introduce yourself, and yeah.
Sure. So I guess so my name's Mirko Vogel. I've known Dave and Terry for the last sort of couple of months. I've just moved to Canada in August last year, and so I'll give you a little bit of background of sort of how, like, what I've done in my life and how I've sort of come to this point. It might sort of help explain the development process a little bit more. So the last 15 years I've worked as a production manager and as a programmer and engineer for a large-scale music touring act around the world, and so specifically with electronic bands. One of the things that I've sort of specialized in with those sorts of projects is to build and design custom control systems for electronic musicians to be able to play live. So it's sort of looking at what control someone might want to have over a light show and sound and, you know, the performance aspects of their music. And because there's nothing really off the shelf that does the majority of those things, it's something that I've sort of taken on and started building for a lot of people. And so that's sort of been I've always had a really strong interest in technology, and especially how it combines with creativity, like the creative use of technology, and how technology can inform a creative process. So a couple of years ago, when I was living in London, I started working as a post-production engineer. So I'm mixing and doing sound design stuff for film and TV shows. And one of the things that really struck me was the sort of, firstly, how much control surfaces cost. So to be able to do all of the things that you kind of want to do as part of a creative job, to be able to buy the devices that allow you to control software is incredibly expensive. And so I started developing a product for myself, and this is really just to sort of speed up my own work process and sort of bridge the divide a little bit in your brain from switching from a very creative mindset to a very sort of pragmatic mindset when you're working, because you sort of work and then you sort of switch between keyboard and mouse and control surface and device, and every time you go back to the keyboard and mouse, you sort of have to shift your brain back into using a different tool set that isn't particularly instinctual when it comes to sort of creative output. So I started developing this software that for my studio here runs on a touch screen, or it runs on two big touch screens, which I'll show you in just a minute. And the idea with this software was that it meant less use of keyboard and mouse. While the keyboard and mouse is a great input method, it's you know, as most of us know that use any type of software, word processing or anything else, there's a lot of clicking and dragging and that kind of stuff. So I wanted to distill sort of the core functions that I used in a particular piece of software to just a button that I could work, press the button, and have it as a bit more of a command center for getting work done without breaking sort of the creative flow of what it is that I was doing. And there was nothing really on the market. There's a couple of sort of touch things for the iPad, but nothing that allowed you to control multiple computers on a network, and nothing that was sort of scalable in terms of size or function or anything like that. So I initially developed this software for myself to sort of speed up my own process. And then when I arrived here in Canada, Rob Kohler, who's sitting on the couch behind me here, who I've known for a long time. So Rob and Dave have worked together a lot on with the Vancouver Adaptive Music Society, and we were talking about some of the work that I'd done over the last couple of years, and then the more we sort of started talking about the work that Rob has been doing here for a really long time, the more we the more we realized how much of a need there is to have devices and frameworks and infrastructure to help people access computers in general. So it's not just, you know, fancy media composers and creative studios and people with lots of money. Like, there's actually like a real need in the world for people to be able to access computers more effectively and maybe with a little bit more of a human approach to technology. So that was sort of how we started to sort of think about the control of computers in general. So it started out as building a system that was very much just for my own work, and the more we sort of spoke to people, the more that Dave and I and Terry and I have spoken, the more we've sort of realized the need to build a framework and device that is actually really help people, not just a privileged few. So that's how this process sort of started. So now we're building what will essentially be a framework. So rather than building a single device that solves a single problem, we want to build a hardware and software ecosystem or a framework that can be really quickly and cost-effectively customized to help different people with different needs. I think one of the things that I've noticed is that there's very little customization of devices for people with disabilities, and those things come at a huge cost, not just financially, but in the amount of time that it takes to build something. And so that's sort of the first thing that we want to try and fix, is the entry cost for getting access to a computer device, but also to sort of re-look at how some of these problems are being approached. And currently, I think, from what I've seen, and from my discussions with a few of you, is that it's a very singular kind of approach. So that there's a problem, and then there's a device that sort of addresses a very singular need, which doesn't really take into consideration that most people, no matter what sort of abilities or disabilities might be, actually have the ability to control many more things than just one thing at a time. And so the main thing that I'm working on the development of this idea is the combination of many different types of input to give a more complex control system. So rather than, for instance, being able to move a mouse around on a screen with a joystick, but to be able to scroll down a window, you sort of have to move it all the way to the side and then scroll down. And it's not a particularly accurate way of doing things. So there needs to be sort of this combination of controls, whether it's sort of pressure switches in combination with something else. The idea of combining controls together, and controls that you're already familiar with and that you're already really good at using, to be able to achieve a more complex result, is I think the sort of main focus for me of this project. And it's really to give people with disabilities, or with certain abilities, and the access to systems that we all take for granted. So that's sort of become the basis of this project and this development that we're doing. And every time I speak to David, or meet with Terry, we talk about new and interesting ways that this technology and this development can go. And so that's one of the things that I would love to get out of this session, is to get people thinking about how the technology that you're currently using, how it is empowering and how it's limiting, some of the good things about it, some of the not such good things about it, so that as we go through the development process, we can try and address as many of those things as possible. So that we have a really informed product and a really informed sort of building block that we can build on. And just to reiterate, so we're not building a single device. The idea is that we're building a framework, because most people don't buy their tools from a single source off the internet. There's organizations and rehabilitation hospitals and care facilities, and there's a lot of organizations that help people get access to computers and to devices and to the world around them. So our aim is to develop this as a way for those entities to quickly and effectively develop something that addresses a particular need that a person might have. I think it's naive for me to think that I can address and know everyone's concerns, but we can build something that is really quickly and easily customizable to allow everybody's needs to be met very specifically by people who really know those concerns.
Mirko, could you I just wonder from a practical point of view, could you, for instance, say the issue with Terry's phone, his ability to access voice messages, to text and all, how would this device assist with something like that? Or this framework, I should say.
Yeah, so one of the things that that Terry and I have discussed is sort of the way that currently things are accessed is very much it's very binary. So there's an on and an off, and it's a single on off. So it doesn't allow for I'll start this again. That was a bit too complicated. The easiest example that I can give, just by sort of being able to answer a phone, is that Terry has great control over his wheelchair functions, right? So the easiest thing for me to say is like, well, why don't we use the thing that you're really good at doing already and just allow you to use that control mechanism to access the things that you want. So for instance, sending a message or answering a phone or opening the door, or, many of the things, Terry, that the remote control that you have allows you to do. But one of the frustrations with that is that the remote control is based on simple on-off gestures, simple on-off switches. And so it takes a really long time to get to the layer and the button that you want to get to. But if you use the thing that controls your wheelchair, which gives you a huge amount of expression and mobility and functionality in your life, by using the same mechanism to be able to navigate through menus or to be able to navigate around a screen, you can get to where you want to go much quicker. So one of the examples that Terry and I discussed last week was, I think someone was coming around to maybe cook dinner, and just to let that person in through the front door, you have, obviously you have to answer the intercom and then buzz them in. But it takes a really long time to get there, and if the intercom, for instance, called Terry's phone, and you could just navigate to a number that lets that person in, or navigates to the speakerphone button, that would be much, much quicker. And by using the same controls that he already has, a really, an amazing grasp of, it would allow you to access those things much easier. Same thing with you, Dave. We spoke about the idea of text entry. And obviously speech assistant, like voice assistants and those sorts of things are becoming much better at recognizing people's voices, and they will inevitably serve a really important function in the access to technology. But there's still something very important about being able to enter text manually. So rather than, and I'm thinking here not just about sort of writing text messages and essays, but if you want to do a specific job, most jobs and a lot of tasks require you to have specific text entry type mechanism, right? So by using, for instance, the joystick mechanism that you use to control your wheelchair, which you've used for a long time and you're really good at using, just by providing access to to a sort of a better way of accessing text, like text input, through circular movement rather than trying to navigate a mouse, around the screen, will not only speed the process up for you, but should become quite quickly an instinctual process. So if you want to type a text message, you can just go, you already know how to do that. Why don't you just do that?
There would be interface through the controller and the chair. Basically, I just try to picture it, get a visualization of what. So there would be a device plugged into this that into my joystick controller that you could program to do the things that I want to do, like typing.
Yeah, so the easiest way to think about it is that there's an existing set of access controls. There's joysticks and pressure switches and sip and puff sensors, and that changes from person to person. Different people have different types of mechanisms that they use. So the idea is that we build a small wireless device that can take any of those controls, and then on the device that you want to use, be it a computer or a tablet or whatever it is, there's a little piece of software that sits on that device, and depending on what needs you have, you can customize that little piece of software to reinterpret that input mechanism to allow you to effectively use it in a much more expressive and easier way. The other thing with this is that most devices are not application aware. So if you, like how you use, your like the joust, for instance, doesn't change from application to application. If you're browsing the internet, or if you're typing an email, or if you're playing a video game, or you're watching television or something, the function of that device doesn't change because it's built the same way that a computer mouse is built. And that is, the computer mouse just does the computer mouse thing. It never changes. But it's a very expressive way of controlling a piece of technology is with a joystick. So by making the software that sits on the device application aware, you can essentially program your input mechanism to act differently depending on what you want to do. So if you want to type an email, maybe the best way to enter text is with your voice. So, if that's your preferred mechanism, then use your voice and use the joystick mechanism to navigate through the menus or to scroll or whatever it is that you currently want to do. And then if you want to interact in a virtual environment, for instance, that joystick might need to serve a completely different purpose. And so depending on what you're doing, the input mechanism can act differently depending on the environment. And so by having a very simple set of control mechanisms, it allows you to use them in a completely different and very contextual way. The same way that we adjust the way that we use a keyboard and mouse automatically depending on what we're working on, depending on what we're doing at that time. It's the same thing, except it happens automatically and it happens in software form. But most importantly, it can scale properly. So if someone has very limited movement, that limited movement can be translated into much broader gestures. So, for instance, much faster movement, or with very small incremental movements on, say, let's just stick with a joystick sort of control for the minute. With very small mechanisms, you can make really big changes. Or if you move it fast, the things slow down and speed up. I don't know if I'm making exactly exact sense of this, but essentially what I'm trying to say is that depending on what you want to do, the software changes to reflect what you want to do, rather than being just a single function all the time. So if you're good at using a joystick, the joystick can do different things depending on, rather than only being a joystick. That's probably the simplest way. And I think it's one of the frustrations that I've sort of taken on board from talking to sort of research hospitals out in Toronto is that there's no sort of set technology or framework or ecosystem that anyone can really build on to do this. So when people try and find solutions to control their telephone or the lighting or environmental controls, there's sort of very niche, off-the-shelf things that you can purchase, but they serve a very niche kind of audience. There's nothing really that acts as the main foundation or the main framework to build this stuff on, and I think that's it limits innovation and it limits progress. And that's one thing that we really want to try and fix, is that we want to be able to give people the ability to progress and have innovative tools, and like everybody else does.
Well, the other part of that problem is the queue that you end up in as the client. When you're waiting for appointments once a month or whatever to get this program right. This sounds like something that would be a lot simpler, that perhaps you could even do some of the programming yourself, or it would be simpler to apply to the problem than going in and getting custom fitted for everything. You'd already have the controller. So it's just adding on something that enhances what you can do.
Well, and it's taking the sort of the approach of empowering both the facilitator and the user of the product. So, we want to empower those people that supply technology to others and the end user as well. So we want to really build this as a way that reduces the cost and time that it takes to build devices for people with disabilities. And we want to reduce the cost on the end user. And we want to give the end user more flexibility and more expressive input for computer systems. So I think by looking at combining controls, by making devices software application aware, you can start looking at the interaction of the human and computer sort of interaction more like an instrument. And I mean, like Dave, going back to playing drums, for instance, the way that your instrument sounds and the way that it pressure sensitivity, for instance, all of those things for you change from song to song, right? Like, you don't play the same drum kit for every song and for every style of music and for every jam that you have, right? Like the drum pads have loads of different drum sounds and mappings and hits and all this kind of stuff in it. So it's really taking a more sort of a music instrument approach to interacting with computers. And that is, to play a guitar, you only really use 4 fingers to play, 4 or 5 fingers, maybe 5, let's say 4 input sources to create all of that harmonic structure and all of those chords. There's nothing to say that, with 3 or 4 input sources, you can't achieve a huge variety of controls over a computer system. It's just more the interpolation, like the combining those controls together that allows you that freedom and flexibility. And there's currently nothing that I can see that really approaches computer use.
Did we get some input from people? I don't know, just see if we're being clear or
yeah. Does it sort of make sense? I'm sort of interested because like I have a tendency to be very technical when I describe things, because that's sort of where my brain naturally operates. But yeah, I mean, I'd be very interested to see if anyone has any questions at this stage, or any yeah, any ideas? Actually, it might help if I just quickly show you the thing that I've made for myself to kind of show you what I've made. Yeah, that might actually help.
And then Mirko, can you describe it as well so Omar can kind of get an idea as to what it looks like?
Of course. Yeah. So this is my studio set up here, so you can see sort of my normal screen. Then I have 2 touch screens here, and essentially these touch screens run. This is the software that I built, and these 2 touch screens run on a separate computer that just connects via a network cable. So it's just it's the same way that you'd connect any computers, Wi-Fi, network cable, whatever it is. And each screen, so this screen here, for instance, has about 200 different buttons and switches and controls on it. And each button or switch has a very specific function for a very specific piece of software. So, for instance, currently I have this program Cubase open, and if I hit this button here, it shows me just all of the location. Or if I hit this button here, it shows me all of the data. Or if I want to make a new track, then I hit this button here, and then a new track pops up. So it's a very quick way of never having to use menus ever again. This is very specific to my workflow, but it helps immensely to be able to control very specific parts of a software with a single button. So this is a touch screen. Obviously, that's not going to work for everybody, but all it really is just a sensor input, right? So when you look at something like a joystick, for instance, which is capable of many different types of gestures, think of it in the same sort of way, that as you're moving the joystick around, depending on the movement that you give that joystick, it can not just move a mouse around on a screen, it can also become a gesture input, or it can become a way of typing, for instance, depending on what it is that you want to do. So this sort of musical instrument approach is really the basis of this idea. And to me, it seems like a very intuitive approach, because it uses a very simple input mechanism to do something very complex. Hopefully that explains it a little bit better.
Does anybody have some questions for Mirko right now, or?
Sure. Well, I was just thinking about something in my head. We're going in the future where everything mostly will be software developer. So as more things, environmental control by software, as easier it is to adapt, actually. That's what I found personally. Because I study graphic design. I'm a student in 2 different schools, BCIT and Emily Carr University. And I use simply a tablet, Service Pro tablet, and with a simple mouse and with a mouse stick. So I use the stylus actually to design, and basically I will use it as my hand. So things like scanning doesn't work, and other things like a mouse, like a Lepsonic joystick made by Neil Squire, it doesn't really work with me because I'm not that flexible. However, things in controlling in my environmental, around my apartment, I find it will be really great if I could control more stuff by my cell phone. Because again, it's not about just adding devices around you. That will make it more difficult, actually. As simple it is, as simple design it is, as better it will be. And that will be only actually made if they will just shrink everything and made it controlled by software. That's my thinking about that's what it will be in the future. It's just a matter of time, actually.
Mhm.
So that's how I see the things.
Mhm. Awesome, Omar. Tom, you had something to say there too.
Yeah, is my mic working?
It is.
Great. Sorry I was late joining you. I don't use very many electronic technologies with any kind of adaptive requirements, but the joystick model that you're describing, Mirko, there's a computer panel in there somewhere that's sending signals to the various receptors which react to the signal. And am I right in assuming that that communication between the joystick and the activators could be Bluetoothed or Wi-Fi'd to your computer, and the software in it would be receiving those signals and interpreting them onto different interfaces?
But that's definitely one of the main ideas with this is that, as you said, joystick has, has in most joysticks cases has two potentiometers in it, which gives you the X and Y axes.
Mm-hmm.
But for instance, those potentiometers have a huge range. There's like they put out a floating point value, and so there's a huge amount of range of expression in a very small device. So, whether you want to use it to move a mouse, or for instance to type, and I'm not saying move a cursor around to find the letters that you want. It's really like re-looking at how text is inputted into a computer. Something like that would allow you a huge amount of expressive possibilities. To the point also where you can use a joystick as a musical instrument, which currently there's not really a lot that allows you to do that. But you're right. We're taking a very simple thing like a joystick with very simple controls, very simple potentiometer controls, and remapping that to access any functions. You can use it as a gesture control, use it as a stylus type input for those that don't have the ability to do that. Basically, the idea is that using very simple controls to do a very complex set of tasks.
So the software would be receiving the signals that would normally go between the joystick and the wheels, and reinterpreting them in the software into whichever ancillary device that could be activated by that software.
That's correct. Yeah, and the software basically it emulates human interface devices. They're called HIDs when we're talking about the operating system, and every operating system has this sort of HID control layer in it. The idea is that we're not rewriting the way that an operating system interprets controls. We're sort of rewriting what controls are being triggered by one device. So like basically what you said is like you're taking these small controls, the software reinterprets that to be something else and sends that to the operating system, and it acts as a native input device. So it doesn't require specific operating system requirements or anything like that. It's just being interpreted differently by the software.
Okay. How far away is this from current reality?
I think realistically, by the end of the year, we'll have our first prototypes ready for testing, and I think sometime next year is sort of the aim at this stage. But I mean, that's where every like with anything new, you sort of take 2 steps forward, 1 step back every day. So My aim is, our aim here is to have a functional prototype by the end of the year that we can show these concepts working, and then we start looking at some focus groups and some testing, we call them sort of validators, like market and idea validators, to show that this is viable and functional and can help people and does all of the things that we want it to do. And so we can sort of show the future potential. But our aim is to get this to market within the next couple of years as a standalone framework. So that it's a small Bluetooth device that all these things get plugged into. That runs on batteries. So it can just sit as part of your wheelchair setup, or your desk, whatever you have. It doesn't require charging every day. It would last at least a week or two, ideally, and so that's a completely portable thing. So if you work in an office, you're not going to take your office computer and stuff home with you, right? Like, you just need a way to be able to access that you're working on. And so the idea is that it's portable, it's wireless, and it's allows for working in and being in different environments. So it doesn't limit you in where you go and what you do. The idea. That's basically it. And the idea here is that it's not expensive. So we don't, it's at this stage we don't have an exact price, but I would say that it's at least half the cost of current remote control systems that allow you to do a single thing. So the price point is important to us, and I think in order for this to really be adopted and be usable for people, it has to be financially viable. And so we don't envisage this cost being extremely high.
Can I ask another question? Some time ago, I think Neil Squire was doing some research on controls that were activated without any physical contact, that the sensors were reacting to eye movement and some brain stimulus. It seems to me it was something with regard to aircraft pilots to trigger weapons and those kinds of things that were being researched. And it on a more practical level, I'm thinking of the eyeglasses that were in vogue when they were first introduced, that people could use to have a protected image on the inside of the glass, depending on their eye movement and whether the thing is turned on. I'm not sure who was making them, and it might have been iPhone or Google, but would those kinds of peripherals potentially have input methods as well?
Yes, and that's one of the aims of this framework, will be that it's expandable. So there's facility for current input devices. So we'll call them analog devices, like switches and joysticks and buttons and pressure sensitive buttons, sip and puff sensors, like all of the current normal things. The platform that we're using to build this prototype on it's called the Atmega microprocessor, and most of those development platforms have a certain amount of analog inputs and then a certain amount of digital inputs. And our aim is to open the digital inputs to this device up. We offer them open for development. So if, for instance, Neil Squire is doing this research on brainwave detection, or I know that there's a whole bunch of research being done on tongue. This is like these tongue movement sensors and pressure sensors, and you're basically using your tongue to control, to have sort of a fairly deep control over devices. It allows this framework to be really quickly and easily expanded for people that are doing this sorts of research. So rather than an organization like Neil Squire developing a system from the ground up to interpret all of that data, they just have to develop it so that it plugs in to this device. And one of the examples that I went through with the Holland Blue Review sort of rehabilitation hospital out in Toronto is that that a lot of the work that one of their labs does is build voice detection algorithms for people who can't produce words like many of us can. And so one of their frustrations is that there's currently no device on the market or elsewhere that allows them to take this sort of voice detection algorithms that they're developing and turn them into inputs for a computer system. So they essentially have to build from the ground up devices and programming and network and infrastructure to test these algorithms for someone, which is hugely expensive and extremely time consuming. And it's a year-long process to do these things. Whereas the algorithm development, they've already done. And so I said, well, if we open up this sorts of device, which essentially gives you all of the control parameters of software control from a variety of different inputs, it would essentially reduce their development time from a year to 2 weeks, which obviously the person that's going to be using this technology is, it's hugely beneficial, and they're not waiting over a year to have a useful device. So by allowing other people to develop input types for it and to develop other devices that work with it is integral to the success of this project. So if someone comes up with, a brain sensing system, they don't need to develop the wireless connectivity for it. They don't need to develop the interpretation of that data on the computer end. They don't need to manufacture anything. All they do is just slightly modify the way that the input mechanism works with our framework, and you're good to go. So if Neil Squire develops a brain sensing mechanism, tomorrow somebody can use it and use it to enhance their life. That's really the aim of this thing, is that it's not going to be the one-stop shop for innovation for computer use, but it will be the idea is that it gives other people the ability to also develop and continue developing stuff and take some of the hard work out of being able to sort of commercialize some of these ideas.
One more quick question. With the receptor in my computer and the interpreting software in there, when I'm hooked to the internet, how is it protected from hacking?
Well, the idea is that it operates the same way that a Bluetooth mouse does. Mm-hmm. So there's no device that actually connects to your computer. It connects via Bluetooth, mm-hmm. and it uses the same security that a Bluetooth device uses to pair with your computer. So it's not a big piece of hardware. It's literally a small Bluetooth device, and built into the Bluetooth pairing mechanism is all of that security. So it has the same security that anything else that you currently use.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it's not a big hardware box, is what I'm trying to say, that plugs into your phone. It pairs automatically. So all the Bluetooth device is doing is taking those different input mechanisms and sending that data into the computer, which runs this software, which interprets that data to do stuff. There is essentially, as long as Bluetooth is secure, and as long as you trust that process, then this will work exactly the same.
Okay, thank you. That's it for the moment.
I had a couple. So if I was using my controller to, play a video game, get into virtual reality, fly a drone, operate a camera, any number of things. So obviously there'd be different modes then, right? I'd be in drive mode or VR mode, and I'm wondering if in some cases, since you may want to move your chair while you're activating a device, if a secondary controller might be required, but it would still be something that you're very adept at using. And also, if it was plugged into the existing controller, would there be, or no, it wouldn't be plugged in. Well, something would be plugged in to control a Bluetooth connection though, right? To my controller?
Yeah, so I
warranty issues, basically, and stuff like that. Controllers are like $2,000.
Look, I would say that just to make it easier in for this sort of use case, is that you would just have a separate joystick.
Yeah.
And that this doesn't it doesn't change or interact with systems that have a huge amount of sort of health and safety implications, right? So rather than using a joystick that's built into your wheelchair, we'd probably just use another type of joystick attached to your wheelchair. So essentially two joystick controls. The reason why we're talking about joysticks with you, Dave, is that it's one of the devices that that is like you've used for a really long time. You're incredibly confident using it. So, you have a huge amount of expressive ability in that tool and in that device. So, but yeah, I think interacting with wheelchair controls is definitely not the aim of the project.
That's good to clarify. I wasn't sure which way you're. We'll just the existing system and override it.
No. I think any time that you're interacting with systems that have a huge amount of health and safety implications,
right.
That's not the aim of this project.
Right.
So, but that's not to say that someone can't take this framework and can't take these tools and integrate them into what they're building. So if a wheelchair manufacturer wants to take the software that we've built and design an input mechanism for the controls on the chair to access that software, then that's okay. But that's up to a company that's really good at that stuff. I can supply that company with the hammer and nails to do it, but we're not going to be that company. I'd rather give that company the tools to be able to develop that, rather than building it for them.
So.
I had a question actually, or maybe not a question, but maybe more like feedback of what I could imagine myself doing that I never imagined myself doing before, right? So I'm definitely prefer touchscreen. For me, it works really well. I really use my iPhone a lot for everything. But I find that everything has its own app. So I have, my key to lock the house is on there. I have my alarm that, for my house is on there. And I don't have any, I'm the same with Tom. I don't really use any adaptive devices for that. I've sort of adapted my life around my disability, I guess. So I use a regular mouse and a keyboard, but not to say probably things could be easier, because I find it really exhausting when I'm working on the mouse and keyboard all day long. And like I said earlier, my shoulder gets really tired. But some of the things that I would love to do is, it's always been my dream to be a DJ. And like, I'm really into the electronic scene. So I really want to learn how to DJ and like do, you know, whatever, like scratches and stuff on albums. I don't know. And and also like, I used to be an artist as well, but I hate doing art now because my art is quote unquote not the same anymore. So being able to like draw or, you know, paint or do something and make it actually turn out how I want it to turn out, I guess, how I envision it turning out in my brain. I'm also a fashion designer. I used to design clothes, but I can't actually physically draw the clothing. So now I have to hire someone to like interpret what my vision is of clothing and have them draw it out, and then have them, you know, take it. I have to take it then to like a seamstress and get it sewn, and just hope all that communication works out, right? So little things like that I could see working really well for me, but not having it be difficult. Like I have tried using the voice commands and voice activated software for typing, but I find it is not super intuitive. I use Siri all the time, but I usually have to like rewrite it and, you know, edit it, and it, you know, it's just, I find it really more frustrating and easier to write texts or than actually using a voice activated. It takes some time to train as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think those, you know, those things are discussions that I've had with quite a few people now, and as the idea of making art actually came about from a visit that Dave and I did out to his friend Christopher, who's also an artist. But he also, you know, he relies on the hands of others to be able to create the art that he wants, and obviously, you know, the volunteers aren't always there, and sometimes they don't show up, and it's a frustrating process for him, and so one of the sort of the main focus of our discussions was actually more about being able to make art with the amount of expression that he has access to, which, you know, and Dave and I talked about this on the way back from that visit. Was like, well, I mean, like Christopher has amazing control over his wheelchair, you know, to the point where he's like darting through the corridors of his place, and I was like, it's crazy, Christopher. Like, is there not such a thing where that just uses those controls to be able to navigate, you know, some design software? And he's like, well, no, there's nothing really that does that. And I said, okay, well, let's put that on the list of things that we should try and do here, is that, you know, we should be able to use things like wheelchair controls and normal access controls, like even sip and puff sensors that aren't just on-off switches, you know, airflow sensors. Like, there's a huge amount of control in how people use their breath. And so by combining that with something else, you know, maybe like a switch or a couple of switches, you can actually start thinking about sort of the expressive possibility of being able to, you know, draw and paint and use that sort of the variance in that control to be able to access more of those kinds of tools. So I think the idea of creative sort of creative expression has to be at the core of this. That's, you know, what makes so many of us happy. It's being able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just being able to type a text message, but it's being able to draw and design and make music, scratch, all that kind of stuff. So one of the input mechanisms, or so one of the things that can be interpreted with this will be MIDI, like native MIDI, so musical instrument digital interface, and OSC, so open sound control. So if you have good control over, say, let's go back to the joystick example for a wheelchair, there's nothing to say that you can't map those controls to some scratching thing. You know, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do it.
Okay.
And for that to sort of to be built into this device is not hard. Like it's not a terribly hard thing to do. But I think that it's where the whole project started for me, and it will definitely be in there to be able to control music making software with accessibility controls is vital.
So essentially, I could like take that, like what you're saying. I mean, I don't use a power chair, but I could, you know, use a joystick pretty easily. So if it was like a joystick on my table or whatever, but I could essentially like take that device that you created, plug it into, you know, go to the club, plug it into their software and whatever, and I could be like a real DJ and make money. It's not like DJs make lots of money unless you're, well, whatever, essentially I could, right?
Well, the idea is that you can turn regular controls that you are good at using into musical instruments.
Right.
So it's not just being able to type, but it's also being able to generate music input. You know, when you look at a keyboard, like, so I have this, I have this keyboard. Just ripping my desk apart here, sorry. So I have this music keyboard here. You know, that's just a whole bunch of on-off switches. It doesn't really do anything else. It's just a whole bunch of switches that allow you to, you know, turn specific note values on and off. So all we're really doing with a joystick or, you know, a sip and puff sensor or with pressure sensitive buttons is we're really just turning values on and off. And the more we look at combining all of those controls together, the more notes we can turn on and off, and the more we can change, you know, dynamically change parameters in a software. Music making is a great example of that, as is graphic design and anything else where you're looking at, you know, shading and the moving of objects and all these things that aren't on-off gestures. Like, it's not a thing that's either, there's no on-off state for a piece of music. It just, you know, a note can be sharp or flat or have, you know, specific timbre or specific pitch, or, you know, it's nothing is a fixed value. So I think that's one of the main things that we're addressing here, is that rather than access devices just being on-off things, there's a whole big variance in that control. So it's no longer just on-off. It's, you know, there's off, and then there's sort of, you know, all the space in between as well. It's not going to be a binary system like most control systems are.
Interesting. And then, so what would you recommend if you don't use a joystick or a sip and puff like all the time? Like, how do you look into, how to help someone who maybe isn't used to that technology?
Well, I think this is maybe where where I would ask people to think about how they, like, what they use, what sensors people have that they are good at using, what technologies they have that they're good at using, and how we would, like, I'd probably put it more back to the community and say, look, I don't know. I mean, this is a big thing for me. Like, I can only base my assumptions on the conversations and the research that I've done, but I'm very aware of, not painting every the same brush. Like, everyone has unique and special things they can do, or that they want to do, or that they're good at or not good at. And so I don't think that there's sort of a one-size-fits-all approach. So I would invite people to have a think about what you have access to and what you wish you could do. What you wish is, like, I wish that I could be a DJ. It's like, amazing. Okay, let's try and figure out how to do that. If that's the thing that lots of people want to do, then we should build facility in there for you to be able to do that. But I'm very aware of not having this sort of one-size-fits-all approach. That's part of the idea of, rather than building a single device with a single purpose, that we build this as a frame that people can build on top of, so that it's very quick and easy to build something that's usable for all types of use cases and all types of people with all different types of needs and wants and desires in life that I can't possibly predict. But I would, and Terry, I'll give you my email address. I'm more than happy for everyone to continue thinking about this, and maybe there's questions that come up in 2 weeks' time, or in a month's time, or get to a point in your life you're like, I wish I could do that. It's like, great, send me an email. Why don't we see if we can do it?
Cool.
That's the best thing that I can offer, is that we're sort of we're at an early stage of developing this, based on what I've built for myself and based on the research I've done and the work that I've done with the software development side so far. It's possible. It's not far removed from the work that I've done previously of building control systems for people. So I know that all of the things that I'm saying are possible to do. What I don't know is exactly what people need and want. That's it's been really great to have these really long conversations with Dave and with Terry, and every time we sort of get into a conversation, we spend a really long time talking about stuff, but they're hugely informative discussions, and more of those discussions will inform a better product and a better outcome. I think that's one thing that a lot of technology companies don't do very well, is that they don't listen well. There's a lot of presumptions about what people want. This is one of those cases where I can't really presume anything. And I don't want to, because I think if I presume that that's what people want, then I'm just going to put something out into the market that really no one's going to care about. It's not going to help anyone. It doesn't really change anyone's life, and that's not the aim of this project. The aim of this project is that it's greatly enhance people's ability to do stuff, whether you have a disability or not. Actually, to me, this is a much more open project for me. That I want it to benefit the people who don't have access to technology as much as we, lots of people take for granted. But at the same time, I can also see a huge implication into other parts of the world. Like when I look at car infotainment systems and how people use those, and it's a hugely complex system of buttons and arrays and stuff, and they're just horrible to use. And so there's a need to sort of shift thinking in general about how we access computers. What I want is any flow-on benefit to keep coming back to this core idea, is that this is to benefit the people that don't have access to technology, don't have access to tools. So whatever we come up with, if I can come up with a system that allows you to be a DJ, and it allows Dave to fly a drone, and allows somebody else to play a video game, and allows people to type quickly and answer the phone or answer the doorbell, turn lights on and off, like do whatever that is. If it allows all of that to happen, and I can build, like, based on that, I can build like a car infotainment system for General Motors or something, and the financial ability that comes with doing that can continually improve the framework and the product that's used by people where this project started. That's a huge win-win for me. It's that that's basically the aim. Is to build something that's really useful for everybody, not just a very small part of the population. And it's one of the reasons why I've stopped building this as a device for creative content people or designers or whatever it is, and I'm now developing this as huge implications for a really large community.
Well, I know for myself, I've bought a lot of devices, or sort of novelty devices that never really went anywhere. They just end up on your shelf. You think, what am I still doing with this? I tried it. It wasn't effective. It's more frustrating than helpful. I mean, I've got a music keyboard here, just a 2-octave input device, but I rarely use it because it's easier just to use the software alone with a mouse.
Yeah.
But the expressive ability of playing the keyboard, would be better. If you can improvise, you can play around. So you're either doing something that, like if you're doing DJing, you'd probably have to use some form of software and maybe touch controls, but you want it to be expressive. That's the whole idea, that you're feeling what you're doing. You're not just inputting data.
Right.
That's kind of the whole point, I think, whatever it is that you're doing.
Right. And it's
low. It's not, I'm restricted to this one little part of my desk in my room to do this. No, I want to be more free. And
and I think that's, to that point, the ability to move around and for things not to be tethered together with cables is also really it's really important.
Yeah.
So that's that's sort of fundamental.
Robert, do you have any comments or anything? We haven't heard from you.
That's quite the prototype that we were shown there by Mirko. Daunting looking. I don't know. I think maybe the IQ points would have to go up 100 points to even use it. I don't know. It all looks like a space age to me, and I'm still in the Stone Age, so I don't know.
I guess the sort of touchscreen thing, again, it's very much just what I built for myself, and sort of what I wanted to show is where this idea started. I don't know if I've got the actual little box here that I could show you, but essentially what the actual physical device will look like it'll be a little bit bigger than a matchbox, like maybe 2 matchboxes together. Like it's just like a little black box, has no screen or anything on it. It's just a little black box with a couple of input devices that you can plug your joystick or, buttons or, gesture controls, basically whatever sort of access devices you have. And all that the box really does is just transmit those input devices to the computer via Bluetooth. And then everything else is just done in this software. And honestly, I don't actually know exactly how the software is going to look. So the look of something I'll leave till right at the end. Like at the stage we're really more concerned of the functionality of the software and how information is interpreted. But I don't know if you've ever used, so I use this thing called a Kensington mouse, which is sort of a trackball mouse. One of the things that the software that runs the mouse allows you to do, so the mouse has 4 buttons on it and then a big wheel on top. And you can change what each button does on the mouse depending on the software that you're using. It's very simple. It's a very simple interface. It's a picture of the mouse, and then sort of choose what you want to do. I'm imagining something similar to the approach of that, and that is that you have these input mechanisms. Depending on the software that you're using, you want those input mechanisms to act. So it's actually going to look really simple. When you open the software up, if you say, for instance, the people that work at like the TIL, where Terry's a board member of, there's the customization of how these things work is all done in the back. It's like you open up the hood and then you can see all of the inner workings and stuff. But for the most part, I think most users will never need to see that. You just, like, once it's programmed and running, you're good to go. So the interface itself will be very simple. What you can do in the back, under the hood, will be very complex and vast. But once it's sort of programmed for the things that you're interested in, what you want to do, you don't really need to continually change it.
Well, bless the engineers.
So essentially, I could use my phone. Let's say I'm going to use my phone, right? And I would connect to the black box that is, let's say, sitting on my desk or something like that. I'm going to connect by Bluetooth via that, and then do everything that I want to do just from my phone.
Yeah, or the little Bluetooth box it's completely wireless, right? So if you feel most comfortable using your phone as the input mechanism, what I would probably look at doing, and this is something actually that hasn't come up in conversation before, so is using one device like a phone to control other devices like a phone. Essentially, if you feel really confident in using your telephone, using all of the input expressive, it's not really a word, expressibility. all the ability that the phone kind of really gives you as far as expressive control, and using that data to control your main computer system or whatever it is that you want to do. That's something I haven't actually thought of doing, but it's definitely something I'm going to give some thought to. I'm sure that there's a lot of people that feel really comfortable in using their smartphone, but they want that smartphone to maybe act as an input source for a more predictable control mechanism for other systems.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So in which case, a little black box is just in your pocket. Like, it doesn't need to be, or in your backpack or something. As long as it's within Bluetooth range, that's totally fine. The platform that I'm working on does do what's called multiplexing. So it allows you to have multiple devices connected at once. And so I don't see there would be a huge problem in connecting like your phone to the device and then the device connecting to something else. I think that you could do that. Yeah, that would be an interesting thing to have a bit more, like a bit further discussion on. Is to, Terry, if you have some ideas on how you would want that to work, I'm very open to discussing that further and seeing what how we could maybe implement something. You know, whether it's a specific control app that you can load in, and you can use voice typing through it. You can type however you enter text, and it can translate that text to a different.
Cool.
And I think that's it's one of the things. So, like, Google has just opened up the development platform for their voice assistant, and it's something that I could see working really well in this sort of like app form. Is that essentially you could use the Google Voice Assistant to to relay commands through this device, or you can use the touch controls to move a mouse around, or to do that. Like my Android phone has this sort of like swipey type keyboard, which I love, and I think that's something that would be a really cool way of entering text. As well. But yeah, I'd definitely invite you to have a think about how you would want to be able to control other computer systems with your smartphone.
Right.
To the point of like looking at ATM machines and banking systems, supermarkets, all that kind of thing. Is that the telephones have all of this crazy good encryption stuff in it. Maybe there's a way that we could look at building that into some sort of bridge as well to give you more independence in how things are paid for, and or just how to get cash out of a cash machine.
Yeah, that would be nice.
So I feel like some of those ideas are probably a little bit further off than this initial thing. One of the big stumbling blocks, I think that's probably worth for everyone to have a bit of a think about, is that Apple products, in particular their phones, are very closed systems. And that is like to build anything that works inside of an Apple phone, Apple will only give you so much access. Whereas an Android phone, for instance, is you can completely customize how the thing works. So if we're building software for particular devices, Apple devices in particular will always have a limitation to them. And so the way that we look at interpreting touch and interpreting different typing mechanisms or different control structures, they will always work better on desktop computers. So not just Windows, but Mac OS as well, both and Linux, and Android phones and tablets. iPhones, they're inherently limited in what you can build for them. It needs to be controlled by the Apple ecosystem, and Apple doesn't allow operating system level control over their devices. They do on their desktops and laptops, but not on their phones. So iOS is a very locked down system that doesn't allow a lot of customization. And I think that's something that is worth thinking about, especially for those of you that maybe work with different societies and different organizations that help people with technology, or you just an interested participant in these discussions. Something that I think is very noteworthy and maybe should be included in some of the sort of education on technology and access tools is that Apple products, not only are they extremely expensive, but they don't allow for a lot of input innovation, because they essentially, they say, we've built the iPad, we've built the iPhone, that is the innovation. You don't get to make something else for it. It's a very locked down sort of system. So really to get the most out of devices and device controls, Android is a much more open that allows for a lot more innovation. So, but I'd be really interested to hear your viewpoint, Terry, if you've got some ideas on that, over the coming weeks or months, whatever it is. And the same goes for everyone on this call, is that if you have some ideas, send them over. I'd love to hear them, and love to hear, if anyone has any dreams, like being a DJ or painting or playing the piano or whatever.
Well, I always dreamed to actually play bass guitar, but I don't know if it's too late. Especially after I became quadriplegic, I thought that would be impossible. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's definitely not impossible.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, give me some time, but it just requires a different way of thinking about stuff.
Well, for now, I told you, as a graphic designer, I actually have some difficulty with the shortcuts that I use in my Service Pro or a tablet, as I use a design software, and it's required a lot of shortcut buttons and whatever, and that's been a little bit challenging because not everything can be actually pressing by stylus. You know what I mean? So that's the thing. And most of my work that I need, it's just required two hands, actually, literally two hands. For example, to press the Alt or Shift and other key at the same time. Fortunately, I find it some kind of other way, but it will be way better if I have some kind of second device that I just maybe not the same mouse joystick that Square made, but something like that. As a graphic designer, I don't know, it's more complicated field maybe, but if it's playing instruments, that will be more luxury an option for me, actually.
Well, I think that's one of the things that I'm hoping to address with this development is this idea of combining controls together to do. So if you've got something that already works for you and you need to be able to press an Alt key, that requires two input mechanisms traditionally, the way that an operating system interprets that information. Yeah. But that's totally possible. It's just not just nobody has built that system, right? So
of course.
It's something that is very unique to the way that you approach your work, and so so that's sort of the idea behind building this as a framework rather than a single device that does a single thing. Is that
of course,
the way that you would want to use it is completely different to someone that might want to use it to scratch records or make EDM music or play.
And it could be exceptional for each person. That's why we need some kind of general device can fit for each person's needs and easy to program, because each person is different. And I want to address something, as I worked with some team before, some software engineers and hardware engineers. And what I find out is this: as the device is more physical, it will be more flexible and function mostly like a hand. As the device will be more visual analyzer or like face tracker or eye tracker or voice recommendation or scanning, it will be more comfortable, but it will be not flexible as the physical device.
That's right, and I think
So
that's. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. So that's the thing, you have like to balance between both. That's my idea actually. I work with the university in DC in SFE before and with some students there, and we find out like there is kind of the gap between the middle. You have to choose in the middle between physical and not physical, and there is advantage and disadvantage between both.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that sort of has been going around my head quite a lot while sort of building these ideas and starting to sort of put this sort of stuff into process is that I'm not going to be able to fix everyone's problems all of the time, but we might be able to build this as an augmented system. So, if you have, like, for instance, if someone builds a great eye tracking system, but you still need some control over something else, this system isn't going to replace the great eye tracking system, but it will give you more input options and more flexibility depending on what it is that you can do. So I think I'm definitely not looking at this as as a one-stop shop. I think this is sort of an augmented addition to things that already work really well. And I'm definitely not, I'm not going to presume that a lot of people have done a lot of really great work to build really great things. And you should use all of those things. That this isn't going to replace things that already work really well. This is just there to sort of to supplement the process, so to speak. And it's something that I, for instance, as a music composer or as a sound engineer, I just take for granted. I have all of these tools and each thing does something very unique and great that it's very good at. I don't have one thing that just takes care of all of the things that I need in my job. So that each device sort of serves a very specific purpose, much like your graphic design example is that's a very specific need, and it requires a set of tools, not a single tool to do it.
Exactly, yeah. And I find, I'm not talking just from my perspective. Of course, there's different people, different needs, and not everyone wants actually can fully control his cell phone. What I find out is some of them it's just satisfied with his answering and not answering the phone calls. That's fine with him, but for me, no. I need like doing phone calls, texting, emails all the time. Very much like exactly as an able-bodied person. Mm-hmm. And most people, like, let's remember that amount of people actually, when I was a client at GF Strong, most of the people, like, there's a lot of amount of young people. And all of us know, like, young people, of course, want to be able to control devices again. Whether they like the way or not, they just want to find out the easy way. And when I was there, unfortunately, the assistive technology department there always provide me a complicated one. Scanning with big button beside me. I was like, what the hell is this? And then what I end up with actually finding my solution in my own, which is just bringing some kind of customized pillow, whatever, I put in my lap, and then I bought a touchable screen cell phone with a stylus, and I just attached the mouth stick they provide me for painting, and I just attach the stylus with it, and I pretty much control it immediately. And I went to other clients over there, and I told them the way, and they follow my way, and they just forget it, what the assistive technology is just trying to tell them about. Right. To be honest, yeah. So that's what happened, and I'm still using it till now. And all that my friends that are actually quadriplegic, pretty much the same age that I was, and most of them they use it now. And I'll stick with the stylus.
Yeah, look, I think that's that's a really good example of sort of putting together a bunch of tools that that work for you specifically. And I think one of the things that I'm aiming to do is, if you have these control things that you are really confident in using, I'm not going to tell you that this is going to be a better way to do things, but by using the things that you're really good at and giving you more things that you can do with that stuff, that's the right. Like, the answer isn't to replace the things that you already have. It's to use the systems that you know how to use and that you're really good at using, and giving you more options with that. So, for instance, in your case, I could see, like, having the ability of like small sort of on-screen shortcuts and sort of augmented controls within the that sit on top of, like, as a little sort of translucent overlay screen.
Probably.
If you had something like that just gave you a whole bunch of those functions that you need, like Alt and Shift and copy paste, whatever the stuff is that you need to do, be able to flick through different applications, be able to go from email to graphic design to all this stuff really quickly and easily by using the same tool set that you've developed for yourself. It allows you to do things quicker and more effectively with less frustration, and it brings you much closer to interacting with computer systems the same way that able-bodied people do. And so that's really the aim. It's not to replace anything. It's just to use what people are really good at using and allowing those things to do more stuff, more things.
And that's the thing, like, as we probably all of you saw different people in different countries, each one almost have like some kind of different way of solving the problem. Let's say as a quadriplegic, or mostly quadriplegic, like, they find a different way of controlling the cell phone, controlling the laptop, computer, or even video games lately. And so each one have his vision, and each one he's comfortable in his way. There is no one way of doing it, that's for sure. But having an option, like as you mentioned, if you make some kind of system that it's like make it flexible, could be programmed easy, that will be heaven.
Well, and that's really and also to make it cost effective, and so that you're not negating the inventiveness of people, but you're really giving people the basic framework to be able to build on and customize the things that you want, so that you don't have to. Everyone doesn't have to go through the process of building these fundamental building blocks every time you do something. So, that's like, I'm hugely aware of that, and that's it's something that I've noticed in all of my conversations and all of my visits to to different rehabilitation hospitals and centers, and it has left a really big impression on me. Not only how how much time it takes for people to develop new things, the sort of inevitable complacency that comes with that development process, because there's generally not enough resources and not enough people to do these things. And so and also how because of that process, how long it takes to be able to make something new work. I think if I can take the 80% of the work out of that, it will allow those people that are responsible for technology in different care facilities and different institutions and hospitals and whatever it is, all of the different people that build stuff. If it allows them to do more work like what you've done with your stylus, your improvised technology solution, it's like more people will have access to more good things more quickly because of that.
Probably.
That's really
Probably. And what I find is they need it actually. It's not an option. They definitely want it. Anyone have an accident in first stages, it will be so confusing that what I should use and if I'm able to control or not. It's very difficult situation, but providing solution or being opening for new solution since beginning, like from the rehab, that's what the research point should be. The rehab center, which is a GF Strong, talking about assistive technology, that they just should not just follow what they tell them on the paper, because to be honest, I totally against that. Every time I go there, I just take a small tour and see who's a quadriplegic and tell them, oh, hey, don't do that, it's easier for you. It's not my job, but I can't stand seeing people taking really long trips to find out the last answer. So I just try to help as much as I can.
Well, and I think that's, it's the same sort of approach that I'm taking here as well, is that there's not one way to do things. And I think really these discussions are, as I said before, they're hugely informative to me, because they're the same thoughts that I have too, and that is that it's the way that things are done at the moment seem old-fashioned, slow, and really doesn't have its roots in innovation. It has.
Yeah.
There's very much a very narrow bandwidth of systems that are applied, and they haven't really moved with the times, And so the idea of building this as an expandable framework, as something that can change depending on what people do, it's aware of what you are doing at the same time, so it's application aware. Like, that's a modern way of designing tools, not just for people with disabilities, but in general. Like, that's, if I look at buying a new digital mixing console, for instance, that's what I would expect if I'm going to be buying this device from, Avid or some other, big multimedia company. That's my expectation as a technology user. And so that's really the same expectation and baseline that we should have for these types of access tools as well, so that it's not just fulfilling a single function for a single person, at a single moment. It's really, you can do lots of stuff for lots of people at the same time, and hopefully, up the baseline of innovation for people like yourself that have found things that really work for them, to do so much of that groundwork for you, so that it doesn't take you so long to find a system that works for you.
I hate to bring it down to, I need to take a bathroom break.
Well, we only have 6 minutes left, really, so.
Yeah, I gotta go and do this before.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Do that.
But I may be back before you're done. I don't know. If not, it's been great. We'll do some follow-up. We'll continue to get ideas.
Well,
a lot of interesting input. And,
awesome.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Dave.
Let me see.
I'm sure we'll be here.
I know it takes me.
Well, guys, I have a school tomorrow too. I have to go.
Thank you, Omar.
Now.
Thank you for your
anything, absolutely. And anything, just send me an email. I'm happy to try it or anything. I hope everything went well, and let's do it.
Awesome. I'm going to, if it's, Mirko said it was okay to send his email out, so I'll send his email to you if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. If
Awesome.
you'd like, anyone.
Thank you
so much.
I'm very open to any ideas and any frustrations and any dreams that people have. Like, that's, we're at a unique point here where we can, where I can tell you if we can do it or not. But if we can do it, and if one person thinks that this is a good idea for them, I'm going to think that there's probably 10,000 or 20,000 other people that's going to think that that's something that they'd like to do as well.
Well, it's all about communication. Okay. Let's see. Okay, guys.
Yeah, go ahead.
Bye.
Have a good night. Bye, guys. Bye.
Yeah. I noticed that, like, Lori, I don't know if Lori wants to say anything. I just want to, sorry, before I cut you off, Mirko.
Yeah, I did.
You want to make some comments or give some?
Yeah. In order for that to work for me, it would have to be voice adjusted. Because, as you know, I don't have the loudest voice.
But you can use like a joystick, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you were, and you drive your chair really well, and so I think what Mirko's saying is however you would use technology or whatever, driving your chair, that could be how you would access whatever you want to do, I guess.
Well, that's a problem, because I'm on the scooter,
Mm-hmm.
and I have very limited room to put anything. But you would have to keep that in mind, too.
Well, that's right, Laurie. And I think one of the main concerns here is that, and maybe a good way to sort of think about this idea is that it doesn't necessarily have to add anything to what you do. You just sort of find the things that you are already using, and it just allows you to do more with those things. So it's so for instance, like obviously like voice assistants and those things are probably going to be fairly ineffective as a way to control computers. And I think this is sort of the inherent bias that's built into a lot of technology systems that that they try and serve the majority of people, but I'm not going to do that. So I want to serve the people that are sort of being bypassed by big tech companies in how they access computer systems. So the best way to think about this is to think about the abilities that you do have. And for instance, you have a huge amount of movement and expressiveness in your mouth, your face, the amount of your breath control, all of those sorts of things. So think about everything that's dynamic in the movement and control that you have. And then think about using those sensors and those mechanisms to control a computer. And so it's just like, like playing the recorder or, something else. It's like it's a very simple input mechanism, but you can do a huge amount of, you have a huge amount of control with it. So it requires a little bit of a leap into the unknown, because we're really talking about something that for a lot of people doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about joystick controls or those sorts of things, it doesn't have to be a joystick control. It can be an like just like a sip and puff sensor, or it can be pressure switches that are that you use to turn things on and off. So it can be a variety of things that can work together to give you this extended expressive control over a computer system. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, I think, in your mind, because we're really talking about something that for a lot of people it doesn't exist as a thing. And it's well, I know that in my discussions with Dave and Terry, that's something that took a little bit of time to sort of think about stuff, because I think that's inherently when we use things, we just sort of take it for granted that this is what we have. Like I have this thing that works like this, and that's it. No one's making anything else that does anything different. So that's really where I'm trying to sort of jump to, is to give people the sense that there is actually more that can be done. Right? And there's more control that you have. And if you go, well, I can control my eyes, and I can control my mouth, and I can control my breath, and I can, I have a sip and puff sensors and a joystick and all this stuff. I'm like, well, you can do a lot with all of that. Just because currently there's nothing that allows you to do it doesn't mean that you can't do a lot with those things. That's really the thing that I'm trying to address with this project and stuff.
I think it's truly extraordinary what you've developed here, that it is so expandable. That is surprising.
Yeah, and it's, the idea is here, like I said, it's, it'll probably be half the price of that, the infrared remote control system that a lot of people use. So, it's not, it's not an expensive proposition, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, very important.
Well, it is very important, and I mean something we can talk about this another time, but something that is very important for me is that it's also a viable business, right? Because with being a viable business, it breeds innovation, and it means you can hire more people to do more stuff. So while it is for non-profit organizations, for the producer of this product is very important to me. I mean, obviously, you need to forge a living and everything else, but with that, there's a for-profit model, so that it allows the innovation to keep going. And if I can show people that this is a viable business, then I can attract investors into this idea. And if I have investors, I can do a better job. So for me, it's important to treat this like a regular tech company, because regular tech companies make huge advancements in their development because they have a viable model that sits behind it. And so that takes a little bit of reconfiguring your thinking as well, and how we look at development and technology for people with disabilities. Is that
it keeps you on your entrepreneurial toes, I guess.
Yeah, and look, I think for things to get enough money to do good things, there needs to be a viable profit model so that people would invest in it.
Yeah.
Right? And I think the example I gave to Terry when I saw him last week was like, someone can give you $100,000 or something, and you can maybe make a couple of 100 units. But if I can show that with $100,000 investment, we can attract $1 million worth of investment into the company, then you can scale exponentially. And rather than two people, coding in the back room building something, you can have a whole floor of people coding, building something, and 50 people or 100 people doing a job are going to produce a better product than two people, tinkering around in the back room. So for me, it's really important also to convey this, that like I'm being transparent about my the way that we're looking at this. But this is a proper company with a real goal here to be financially viable, so that we can continue building really good things. Now, we don't just do this once, but we continue doing it. We continually improve devices, continually improve software, feature sets, so that if someone sends us an email saying, hey, I wish that we could do the thing, that we actually have the resources to go, great, you'll have it in a week, rather than like, go on a wait list and, it might happen in a year or something. So like every software company, we continually roll out updates and new features and new things to continue to improve the product and improve the things that it can do for people.
Oh, adaptability, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really, it's important for me to be transparent about that, because I think that's a really fundamental part of the success of this project, is that it needs to have this viability model so that we can attract people into it, and not just out of the goodness of people's hearts or pockets, but really like as a substantial, they call it like a triple bottom line, like it has to be good for people, good for the planet, and good for the company financially. So, if we can hit all of those things, we can build a great company that can build great things for people that need it. That's a win-win for me. And, just something I wanted to sort of add at the end here, like that's really the goal here, is to make this not as a small backroom project, but really build this as a worldwide platform to help people. And the way to do that is to make it financially viable.
Are you in Vancouver?
I am, yes. Yeah.
Have you ever tried Van City? You talk about investors.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, I gotta sign off. Sorry.
All right.
I gotta sign off, but I'll be in touch soon.
Definitely.
Okay.
Hey, thanks everybody.
Okay,
See you, Dave.
Yeah, sorry, Lauren, you were saying the Van City have a bunch of...
I have attended workshops where they look for stuff like this to invest in.
Well, that's right, and I think it's one of the avenues that we will definitely be going down. Once we have they call it an MVP, a minimum viable product. Once we have an MVP, then the next step before we go to an investor or look for investment is to have these things called market validators. And basically we have if we have a product that we can show people, like, hey, this is kind of how it works. And then someone, for instance, like the Technology for Independent Living, what's the organization called that sits within, Terry?
Well, BCITS is the confusing acronym.
So, for instance, we would go to BCTIS and say, and we would go, this is what we're building, right? If we build this, is this something that you want? And then they might be like, not really, man. That's not really what we're after. Or they might go, this is amazing. We would love one of these things. How much is it going to cost? And then we can say, like, well, I think we're sort of aiming, let's say, 450 or 500. And then they would say, like, well, we would, they would do the math and go, well, wow, that's like, we would save, let's say, $300,000 a year by having this device and using this as the framework that was built all of our tools for other people for. And so we would get what's called an ROI, which is like a registration of interest from places like that, which we can then take to investors and say, right, we have the product, we have these letters of interest and LOIs or ROIs to say, if we build this, they will buy it. And once we can prove that we can build it, we have people that want to buy it, then there's a tangible sort of mathematics that something like a bank or an investment company or private equity firms or whatever it is, that they can say, right, how big's the market, what's the cost per unit, all that kind of stuff, and then you can say like, oh great, well, we think this idea is worth this much, and that's how much. So it's definitely something that I'm thinking about. It's a fair way off at this stage, and I don't want to sort of put the horse before the cart, so to speak. But all of those things will be part of this process. Look, if it doesn't happen, I'm still going to make it. It's not like, I'm sort of,
I heard what you said.
As well.
But here's another idea. With the Canadian Disability Act coming in now, government funding, it's something else you could look at down the road.
Excuse me, group. It's Tom. I'm sorry, I have got to leave the meeting now. Thank you very much for the interesting insights, and hope we can keep in touch through Terry.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's like with the Disability Act, Lori, coming in, hopefully, that might be, but I think like there's a bigger market than disability for Mirko, which is important, right? Because in order for you to have a viable business, you need to have a larger market than just people with disabilities, really. I mean, it is great that it will help all of us, but yeah, like I think, you have to expand the market beyond that also.
Well, look, yeah, and I think that's, we're sort of looking at this as obviously like, we have all of these connections here in British Columbia, and I'm really using the information that we're getting here to build something that has a more global impact. But in saying that, if Terry, if you have or Laurie, if you have a link to what's happening with the Disabilities Act, I'd be really interested in reading about that.
Yeah, what I'll do is, because I have to, there's another meeting that's going to be starting in this very soon. So what I'll do is I will send out Mirko's contact information to you guys, and whatever like ideas that you're spurred upon after listening to this, some feedback, some ideas for him, send them his way, connect with him, right? And I'm sure you'd appreciate that too, Mirko, so.
Yeah, definitely would. And I would stress to say that we're at very early stages here, and that it's not going to happen overnight. This is a long process, but the the information and the feedback and the comments and dreams and hopes and inspiration that I can get from anyone that's interested in emailing is hugely helpful in being able to build something that is good. And I've got a thick skin. It's totally fine. Be very honest about your thoughts and ideas. It's definitely appreciated in whichever format it comes. But yeah, like I said, we're a fair way off, and so I definitely can't move that quickly. But we are doing it, and we want to do it properly. And this feedback is hugely valuable in being able to do.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. It was really interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and we will talk to you guys soon.
All right then.
All right, Terry. Well, I'll talk to you on email.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for your time.